Chapter 263 to 266. The Academy was not the only place that received an overhaul in Kirigakure. Ringo was a knucklehead, but once she got something as her goal, she did her damnedest to finish it. That's the major reason why she became the wielder of Kiba in the past. She had no real chance to speak of when she was young. Sure, a strong lightning affinity was rare in Kirigakure, but bestowing Kiba blades to an orphan was an outrageous thought. Yet, Ringo managed to get them despite all the natural obstacles and prejudices in her way. Hence, Rei knew that if he wanted Ringo to properly start developing Kirigakure, he had to make her interested in it. And there were only two things Ringo thought interesting nowadays: him and forging. Now, Rei could have developed a reward system and promise her more dates, snuggling, sex, whatever for doing tasks. That, however, felt hollow to Rei, as Ringo was one of his wives. Hence, these things were not supposed to be rewards, but natural happenings in their relationship. Instead, Rei decided to go about it through Ringo's interest in forging. Alas, Kirigakure was an inland village, located almost in the middle of the water country that focused on sea trade. If Ringo wanted to develop better forging in the village, she first had to develop some outside village bases in major ports of the country. Then, she had to develop the infrastructure and trade through the sea to get better materials for forging, indirectly developing the economy of the whole village. It certainly was no coincidence that most imports for this area came from the Uzushio Trading Company either. Sure, Kirigakure could have gotten their materials through the trading companies of the water country, but in the long run, that would be really foolish and expensive. This way, Ringo may have invested a lot of money, but the returns were directly paid in the development of the village and its businesses that would, later on, bring revenue, paying for themselves. Just to develop forging in the village caused Ringo to develop a multitude of other things, too. Things that were necessary for the smooth running of the village. In just 3 years, Kirigakure became completely independent of the water daimyo, as they had their own businesses that were fully capable of financially sustaining the village. This resulted in the daimyo having much lesser influence over the village in general. No longer could the nobles of the water country demand some missions to be accepted, despite being fully aware that the survival chance is almost zero. After all, what other reason than political pressure could a village full of superpowered killers have for sending its soldiers on a suicide mission? Why would a village even do that? They did missions to get money. Having a ninja killed during a mission was, on the other hand, always a loss. The village spent years of effort to nurture its ninjas, so throwing their lives away to please some rich fat fuck, as Ringo called them, was completely foolish. Some council members, especially clan heads, saw this deviation from the traditions as atrocious. Kirigakure was supposed to be a ninja village, and that meant their income should come primarily from taking missions. Their protests might have been silent, but Ringo and Ao took note of this. Ringo's response? So, you basically want to be the glorified servants for hire for rich nobles, huh? You lot really did forget what it was like during the Warring States era, didn't you? Yes, the clans were hireable for a price, but other than that, the clans were also completely self-sufficient. They were not under anyone's rule and usually roamed freely, no matter what the territory owners thought. Yet, you would like us to depend on Daimyo's generosity and work for him as if we were his loyal dogs. Are you stupid? He is just one fat and inept man, yet you cower in front of his supposed influence and beg for the scraps from his table, despite each of you being able to single-handedly wipe out an entire battalion of his army. Pathetic. You are nothing but prideful slaves. I guess we are lucky it's not you who is the Mizukage, but me. I at least don't cower in front of a powerless civilian just because he has a fancy title. What's he gonna do to me? Hire another village to start a war with his own nation? Please. That was the longest speech Ringo delivered in the 2 years she was the Mizukage, and it was also one she said with such derision and contempt. The council members listened, shitting their pants as they just waited for her to lose her temper and pounce, killing them in the process. The clan heads really experienced a fright that day. To give Ringo credit where it is due, she did tolerate their grumbling for the better part of a year. Enough was simply enough, causing her to erupt. After that verbal lashing, the clan heads thought long and hard about the meaning of her words, and that later on had a major impact on the entirety of Kirigakure. It took a few months for these words to have the desired effect. The clan heads were prideful beings, and the source of said pride was their clans. You are nothing but prideful slaves. In the end, it was these words that made the clan heads look back at how their clans transformed in the past century. And many of them were horrified when they compared what had been with what currently was. They were not stupid. They just didn't look at the situation from that angle. They lived in the present, not looking at the past overly much. Only after they did look, did they figure out what Ringo was trying to accomplish. She was trying to bring back and implement to the village the independence the clans enjoyed a century ago. This led to yet another milestone in the history of Kirigakure. The clan heads, of their own volition, bowed to Ringo, both figuratively and literally. Before, they followed her because she was powerful. Too powerful for them to do anything about her. Too powerful to even try such a foolish thing. Now, they found a reason to respect her as their leader. A reason other than her overwhelming power. And suddenly, Kirigakure was unified more than ever. Well, sure, it all started with a misunderstanding. Ringo couldn't care less about Kirigakure's independence, but if she was to make her village into the best producer of forged weaponry, she had to get some leeway from the nobles and the daimyo. Nevertheless, misunderstanding or not, Rei was actually impressed and flabbergasted at how Ringo gained the loyalty of the whole village. When he put her up to this little forging development project, he had no idea she would have been literally worshipped by the village. Ah, well, all's well that ends well, no? At least, Rei no longer had to think about how to safeguard Kirigakure's loyalty and obedience. Considering the ninja and civilians alike followed Ringo's word as if it was a holy scripture, after they noted just how much better did she make the village and how low became the mortality rate of their ninjas. The best part? The woman had no clue. She simply couldn't care less. And that concludes the report on the puppetry department training. Lady KasiCair, the vice leader of the said department, reported to Pakura before being dismissed. The puppetry department was one of the very first things Pakura came up with. Tsunagakure's main war tactic was simple. Puppeteers were one of the most important parts as they provided cannon fodder in the form of their puppets. The puppets were not alive, so having the enemy dispose of them was not a big deal. The puppeteer just had to pull a new puppet out of a storage scroll and the battle could go on. Moreover, the Suna puppeteers were also masters at using a wide range of poisons. One nick in the battle was usually over, and these puppeteers then were protected by Tessenjutsu users who were killing beasts at mid-range with their Kamaitachi no Jutsu. One can't really appreciate how strong that technique was unless seeing a man dismembered out of nowhere because invisible wind blades no one noticed impacted him. And once the Tessen user learned how to hide a wind blade in another wind blade, let's just say the Jonins of other villages rightfully feared engaging Suna on the battlefield more than they feared other villages, because fighting against them could feel pointless at times, with waves of disposable puppets swarming the front lines. Suna might not have been the largest of the hidden villages, but with puppetry that was not such a big deal. Every puppet could be counted as an additional shinobi as long as the controller could keep up. When talking purely about a clash between Chunin-ranked ninjas, as that was the most frequent thing to happen during a war, puppets were actually superior and disposable. They could pull a hidden blade out of anywhere on their body, disassemble into individual parts, and again reassemble, twist at angles humans could never achieve, and much more. The only limiting factor of puppets was the puppeteer and the range of weaponry in them. In the current period of cold weapons, puppets were the best war machines the world had to offer. It was obvious Pakura would focus on improving the puppetry of her village, no? The puppeteers of Suna were never united. The skills were passed down either in scrolls or from master to apprentice, which was incredibly ineffective in the long run. Sure, the puppetry stayed a secret this way. Broken puppets were easy to acquire on the battlefield, and yet no village could replicate it, no matter how they tried. That was only possible thanks to the extensive secrecy around the art. The puppetry department changed this aspect of the village, however. The puppeteers were now united under one department, whereas the prominent families in the craft received high positions to appease them. Other than that, however, the division was based on merit. The vice leader, for example, Shunriku, was a civilian-born kunoichi, somebody who would never be able to attain such a high proficiency in the craft, to become a vice leader if it wasn't for the common library in the department where every puppetry clan contributed some of their knowledge, making a decent base for anyone wanting to learn the craft. Shunriku, in only 3 years, jumped from an ordinary chunin into elite joni, who was knocking on the doors of the S rank. That was a pure talent for puppetry. Now that the talent was fed enough knowledge, it could flourish in full. The second coming of Sasori, eh? Elder Chiyo released a weary sigh as she appeared from the shadows in the corner. That woman is way too fanatical, she added with a sad chuckle. Pakura raised her eyebrow at the old woman, not commenting. Riku was one of her most loyal subordinates alongside the Suzumiya clan. The woman knew who was indirectly responsible for her sudden improvement. It's in the eyes. Chiyo started again after seeing the amused expression on Pakura's face. Riku is a stern and no-nonsense type of person. Well, she is basically channeling you, Pakura. Both women grinned. But, Chiyo frowned. The woman is really like Sasori, cold, detached, focused, with a frighteningly inhuman perspective of looking at things, Chiyo said in distaste. To think your reforms would bring to the village a person who can control hundreds of puppets at the same time while being able to fight in taijutsu with her own body. Chiyo's face showed a glint of bitterness. She was one of the people who believed that puppetry techniques should stay in the family. Yet, after the establishment of the puppetry department, the village experienced a sudden boom in the craft. More and better puppets were developed on a daily basis as more and more civilian-borns focused on the craft. Everybody could improve a puppet and register a patent, getting paid for it. With each tweak, the puppets became more unpredictable and dangerous. That was also one of the reasons why she compared Riku to Sasori. She was dastardly creative when creating her own puppets. She was not the vice leader because of her skills at killing with puppets, but because of her skills at creating puppets. The assortment of weaponry in the woman's puppets was disgustingly lethal, even for Chiyo's standards. Riku was Tsunagakure's own one-woman army, loyal to death to Pakura. Pakura inwardly smirked. To be honest, the entire success of Riku could be chalked up to a mental jutsu she gave the woman for her loyalty. Sure, her talent for puppetry was undeniable, but it was that mental jutsu that allowed her to spread her focus to so many things at once. The access to trap-making techniques of the Suzumiya clan helped Riku a lot too. Not that Chiyo had to know that. In a way, it was disheartening for Chiyo. There was nobody who would dare to oppose Pakura at this point. Riku was not the only one whose loyalty Pakura had. Temari. Better not think about that. Chiyo shuddered when she remembered her last meeting with the 12-year-old girl. The wind mistress of Suna was downright terrifying for her age. She could do things some jonins in Tessenjutsu Corps had problems performing. No longer was Gaara the reason for concern as far as the Sabaku family was concerned. The scariest fact about the entire matter was that not that many knew about it. Temari was in ANBU since the day she graduated 2 years ago. But those who knew that behind the mask of the wind mistress of Suna is hiding Temari couldn't help but start comparing the girl to Itachi Uchiha for the sheer potential for slaughter the girl's invisible wind blades possessed. Temari's record was stellar too. 42. A-rank missions finished without any difficulty in the 2 years of her service. By now, the girl should have been promoted to Jonin, but Pakura, for some reason, kept the girl in ANBU, hence giving her access to high-level missions, while officially keeping her at the rank of Genin. Chio was really curious, but she was not sure she wanted to know what the Scorch Princess had planned for the girl. Good that you mentioned Sasori. Pakura suddenly interrupted Chio's train of thoughts, causing her to stiffen because of the sudden shift in the topic. I need you to recall him back, she added with such an indifferent tone, Chio almost choked. What? What do you mean to recall him back? Chio asked, schooling her expression. Pakura just rolled her eyes. Don't even try it. I am aware Sasori killed the third KasiCair and became a rogue ninja on your orders. I am also aware there is a spy, or a connection you two have on Suna Council. The Yura guy, right? Chio was forced to take a step back from the shock she felt. No one was supposed to know about that mission but her and Sasori. Pakura dismissively waved her hand. Ah, I get it. The third was a prick. I lived in this village too, you know. She snorted. As for Rasa, I think you simply gave up when one idiot was swapped for the other. She shrugged. That said, I want Sasori to become the leader of the puppetry department. Call him back. I have a deal for him. Chop chop. Chio could only stare at her leader, for the first time in a few decades, gaping in astonishment. Pakura stood near the edge of the sand wall encompassing Sunagakure, waiting for the guest of honor to appear. She enjoyed her current situation. Maybe a bit too much, after all. Chio had no idea that Pakura was using her bloodline to subtly warm up the air around them, increasing the discomfort of her companion. In the past few years, Chio was a big help to Pakura, but the old hag never made it easy to manipulate her. Pakura knew Chio was not on her side. She was more of a fence-sitter who just waited for a good chance to pounce. That was the biggest reason why Pakura only now asked Chio to call Sasori back. In recent years, Chio became a bit more loyal to Pakura herself, rather than Sunagakure. It wasn't by much, and Pakura doubted Chio even realized her small shift in demeanor, but thanks to that, Pakura could finally put a minuscule amount of trust into the old hag. Finally, Pakura suddenly said, causing Chio to raise her head and notice the hunched-over form of Hiruko, clad in the Akatsuki cloak, standing on the very edge of the sand wall. Smart. He is in a good position for both attacking and running away, depending on what would be needed. Chio inwardly praised while Pakura just raised her eyebrow at the man. Exactly on time, Pakura amusedly noted. You even hid for the last half an hour in that little crevice in the sand wall in order to appear here on time. I must admit I am as impressed as I am exasperated. To give Sasori credit, his puppet body only showed his surprise by halting for a second before he was back in his normal and indifferent manner. I should have expected to be discovered, Sasori muttered for himself before looking at Pakura. You do have some skill. Both Pakura and Chio noted he did not say she was a good KasiCair. Rather, he just agreed Pakura was a good kunoichi. Then again, some skill in Sasori's dictionary meant he acknowledged her as a threat. That, in itself, was tremendous praise from the perpetually grumpy wooden doll. I see that you did not leave Akatsuki yet, Pakura offhandedly mentioned, looking at the black cloak with red clouds on his body, causing Sasori to let out a grumbling growl. As if I would leave my safety net without even knowing your offer. Chio may be my grandmother, but I am not an idiot. If this deal is not satisfactory, then staying in Akatsuki is the most logical option. Yeah, you do not possess even 1/10 of Chio's care about Sunagakure. Pakura smirked. That much she knew. The man cared only about one thing, his puppets. Pakura just rolled her eyes at Sasori. Let's cut to the chase. Neither you nor I have time to waste. Sasori appreciatively e-and while Chio glared at Pakura with unveiled distaste. "No time, my ass! If so, why did I have to wait 2 hours here with you?" "Fine. Tell me your offer then," Sasori said. "There is not much to it." Pakura shrugged. "I want you to be the head of our puppetry department and work on enhancing the puppets of our village while training some apprentices." So far, the offer sounded as if Pakura was inviting Sasori to serve Tsunagakure again. Now that irritated the man to no end. Before Sasori could reject, Pakura threw a scroll at him. Sensing no chakra from it, Sasori caught it, cautious of any would-be trap. He looked at Pakura and saw that she beckoned him to open it. Sighing to himself, Sasori opened the scroll and... Chio could only furrow her eyebrows when she saw her grandson entered his interested mode after reading the scroll briefly. She couldn't help but wonder what was in the scroll. Finally, Sasori finished with reading and turned to Pakura. "Is this true?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Before the meeting, he tried to scout the village a bit, which failed. That impressed Sasori, so he got into contact with his informants and got the gist of what was happening in Tsunagakure these past few years. He was flabbergasted when they informed him the new KasiCair decided to invest in agriculture and that fields were created on the top of the enormous sand wall surrounding the village. More shocking, however, was the fact it was the puppetry department that was responsible for the field. Who would have thought growing crops could be good training for novice puppeteers? Then again, Sasori had to begrudgingly admit it was a good idea. Taking care of fields took a lot of effort and repetitive movements. Novice puppeteers would indeed learn how to manipulate their puppets and polish their chakra control over the chakra strings if they used the puppets to grow crops. Not to mention, it was not a waste of time since this made Tsunagakure completely independent and self-sustaining as far as food was concerned. Pakura put her left hand on her hip. "You are not the only prodigy in the art Tsunagakure produced," she taunted. "You are also not the most clever one, considering what you did to your body." Sasori stiffened, while Chio's eyes slightly widened, and her head snapped towards Sasori's form. "I bet you silently regret it every single day." Sasori stayed silent, waiting for Pakura to continue. "It's a pity, you know. If you applied yourself, you might have surpassed Tsunade in the medical field, considering what you managed to do to yourself," Pakura said. "Well, I mean Tsunade as she was before she met Rei," she mentally added. "But because of your fixation on human puppetry, your creativity in making puppets plummeted." Sasori looked at the scroll he had in his hands. It was true. He focused on human puppets and the Kekkei Genkai. He focused on perfecting himself. And yet, the scroll has so many incredible upgrades that would make puppets into literal art, Sasori thought, remembering his earlier years when puppetry was not about organs and muscles but about wood and screws. He did regret making himself into a puppet. While it made him more efficient, it also robbed him of most of his human creativity and perspective. He could control 100 puppets at once, yet it was nothing special, because neither of these 100 was special. Since he became a puppet himself, he did not create anything but human puppets. He was aware that limited his combat potential immensely. Human puppets were powerful, but there were not many strong, useful bloodline ninjas that could be made into human puppets. And who knows, maybe, if you are a good boy, you might even deserve rehumanization. Pakura threw him a bone. Sure, her tone and wording pissed Sasori off, but her words... Now that would make his breath hitch if he still needed to breathe. "Lucky for you, I know the perfect person to undo the damage you caused to your body." And with that, Pakura knew she had him. Sasori was not a complicated man. He loved puppetry. Offering him a chance to develop the art and create more powerful puppets was a good bait to poach him from Akatsuki despite the threat of death. The offer to make him a human again, to make him regain his own creativity again, that was just the finishing move. After all, Even if he became a puppet himself, his living core was still made of a normal, unenhanced organic matter. Hence, it aged. It was not like he gained immortality when he became a puppet. Pakura did not need to be a genius to know the man regretted it. Naturally, Sasori only gave an affirmative answer after 10 minutes of consideration. Turning to the bewildered Chiyo, Pakura gave her a wink. "Take him to the KasiCair office, would you?" she ordered, getting Chiyo out of her reverie. Chiyo was about to answer when Pakura burst into smoke, causing her to owlishly blink and realize that the person with whom she waited 2 whole hours under the scorching sun was just a clone. The entire Tsunagakure heard Chiyo's reaction to that realization. That bitch. It has been 3 years since Shikaku became the Hokage, and he could proudly proclaim he no longer needed to work 16 hours per day. Nowadays, after the overhaul of the administration system, he managed to finish his daily dose of paperwork in just 10 hours. Now that I think about it, why am I still working so much? Shikaku despondently thought while putting the pen down and releasing a sigh. Shikaku Nara! Don't you dare to slack! Your approval on these documents is needed in 2 hours! Resounded through the closed door to his office. How does my wife even know when I am taking a break? Shikaku inwardly grumbled. No. The real question is, why is my wife still my secretary? Then again, how does a proper husband fire his own wife without having to live through a hellish home life for the next few decades? Honestly, Shikaku was stumped. When he finished the improved administration system, he thought he would finally get his hard-earned freedom. Alas, he was so woefully wrong. Apparently, now that the administration of the village was no longer a mess, Tsunade thought it was time for rapid development. Needless to say, Shikaku cursed the woman with all his mental prowess. His paperwork that finally calmed down suddenly quadrupled as the development picked up the pace. I can't really complain too much, can I? Shikaku wryly thought in distaste as he remembered the reports from Jiraiya's spy network. Tsunagakure started developing at an incredible pace, and it was rumored their puppetry started to become a lot more dangerous. More and more Konoha ninjas who encounter a Suna team return from their mission with a report on the Suna team having at least one puppeteer in their midst. That was weird in itself, and Shikaku thought long and hard about where Tsunagakure got so many puppeteers. Sure, it was their specialty, but training a good puppeteer was hard, and it was usually a skill that was kept in a family. If Tsunagakure suddenly started training puppeteers en masse, Shikaku didn't want to think about it. Even with their limited number of puppeteers, Tsunagakure deserved a spot among the major 5 hidden villages. But now, there were rumors of the establishment of a puppetry department in Tsunagakure that was spewing strong puppeteers one after another. In these 3 years, Suna also gained fame through a few of their ninjas. Names like Wind Mistress, Shunriku, or Scorch Princess. It was honestly weird. 3 years ago, Tsunagakure had so many problems, and yet, now that the KasiCair changed, it was as if they were experiencing a miraculous recovery and sudden rise in power. They were picking up the pace and becoming stronger by the day. Allies or not, that was a very worrying thing for Konoha. Another cause for worry was Kirigakure. If having a threat on the left side of the map was not enough, the hidden village on our right side also had to decide to become a pain in the ass. Shikaku silently groaned. Unlike Suna, Kiri had no new famous ninja added in the last 3 years. That was not a relief, though. After all, from the mostly useless reports of Jiraiya's spy network, Shikaku could piece together the fact that Kirigakure ninjas no longer sought fame. All of them now wore masks and actually acted like assassins. The only exception was the famous, easily identified people like the 7 swordsmen of the mist and the Mizukage. That was frightening in itself, how the new Mizukage could enforce such obedience in her new troops that they would disregard their desire for recognition. If that was not enough, though, the overall improvement of Kiri troops was also noted. Yet, Konoha had no real way to ascertain to what degree did Kiri's military improve. Kumo and Iwa picked up on this newfound development drive too, and tried to emulate Kiri and Suna. Yet, their leaders were not administrators. They were a muscle-brained fighter and a geezer set in his ways. Needless to say, the rate of development in Iwagakure and Kumogakure was really slow and could be outright disregarded. At least, now that every village focuses on self-improvement, there is no time for war. Shikaku chuckled. He really wondered how the two weakest villages could improve so much in just short 3 years, when the supposedly strongest villages failed to follow their pace. The most maddening was the fact these villages not only improved in military matters, but also in their economy. 3 years ago, only Konoha could boast of being semi-autonomous thanks to the high rate of civilians present in the village. Now both Kiri and Suna were completely fine on their own. Kiri no longer needed funds from the water daimyo and was actually strong enough to keep the man quietly satisfied with what he had left of his influence. Suna, the new KasiCair, Pakura of the Scorch, was a friend of the Wind Daimyo. Unlike when Rasa was in command, Pakura got whatever she asked from the Wind Daimyo. Not that Suna needed anything from the guy considering Pakura's affiliation with the Uzushio Trading Company. Yet another concern, Shikaku wanted to cry. In the last 3 years, a relic of the past started to rear its head. Uzushio ninjas. Shikaku was 95% sure they did not originate from Uzu Islands, though. If it was just one occasion, it would be nothing suspicious but a massive number of missions being assigned and accomplished by an organized group of people without any identification. Clearly, there was a new major player present in the world. This new party's troops usually wore no visible identification mark on their bodies and operated in remote countries, so information about them was scarce. But after a few years of activity, it was definitely noticed. The leaders of the 5 major hidden villages were very curious about who was the new player. The smarter ones surely noticed that the rapid rise of Uzushio happened just a few years before the appearance of these new individuals. Or at least that was the conclusion Shikaku came to after putting a lot of consideration into the matter. Not that he could actually accuse Uzushio of being a hidden ninja village, when the fact they ceased all ninja activity was already established and proved by various inspectors from other countries. As far as international politics was concerned, Uzushio was untouchable. If anybody tried to attack Uzushio, a supposedly civilian village that focused on trading, it would be the start of a new ninja war. Uzushio had too many connections with the foreign daimyos, too many profitable deals with other countries. Attacking them was a surefire way to give other nations a righteous reason and daimyos' permission to gang up on the poor idiot who would try. Yeah, there is no way anything like Kumo, Iwa, and Kiri pulled off in the past happening again, Shikaku thought. The new mysterious group of ninjas was not yet a threat, and they did operate in countries that were quite far from the hidden villages. Shikaku felt something wrong about the entire situation, though. When even Tsunade forbade him to focus on them, well, let's just say he found something fishy going on in the world and his daimyo was definitely involved. That only proved Shikaku's personal theory of these ninjas being from Uzushio. After all, Tsunade was a quarter Uzumaki. And if there was one fact he knew about Uzumakis, it was that the Uzumaki clan did not believe in such a thing as a partial Uzumaki. If you had Uzumaki blood, you were an Uzumaki. Simple as that. And Uzumaki always stuck up for each other. They were stubborn like that. Then again, thinking about it would be too troublesome, so he let it go. Hokage or not, Shikaku was aware the position lost most of its power when Tsunade took the reins. Even if he could prove that Tsunade did not work for the benefit of Konoha. What then? After all, she was the new daimyo of the lands on which Konoha was built. Tsunade's interest was Konoha's interest. How could he actually accuse her of being a traitor when she was literally the person who decided the definition of the word traitor around these parts of the world? It was easier and much more logical to accept Konoha now belonged to a Senju that just happened to be an Uzumaki too. The world changed. Shikaku sighed as he signed another paper. What a drag, he added with a lazy grin. He couldn't really complain all that much. Even if Tsunade was in some way betraying what Hiruzen Sarutobi would dub the will of fire, Konoha was flourishing under her rule to a degree no other Hokage could boast of. Even a blind idiot would realize that the village was wealthier, stronger, and, surprisingly, more united. The Nara clan was under Tsunade's command from the start anyway. The agreements signed upon Konoha's creation would ensure that. There was no reason for Shikaku to worry about Tsunade's political moves in the village. No way to really alarm anyone who did not realize what was happening yet. His clan was in the clear, and that was what really mattered to him most. Yet, Shikaku could only marvel at how quickly clans like Aburame, Inuzuka, or Kurama, clans that were not really Senju supporters, suddenly became more amiable towards Tsunade and acknowledged her as their ruler. While he was slaving away under the heavy strain of the paperwork and his wife's nagging, Tsunade was clearly, subtly moving her agenda forward, getting Konoha under her thumb. Shikaku found it laughable, yet admirable. For the first time since the creation of Konoha, the ruling concept of the village was followed to a T. A real dictatorship was slowly being established without anybody even noticing or saying anything.